All right, so I'm welcoming up Marilyn Higgins from Syracuse University and Neil Hoffman from the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. Welcome up. And our next topic is academic institutions, of which we all know Milwaukee has many. So it's a good place to have this conversation. And I think universities have sort of long been anchors of activity, life, culture, both within their walls and also outside of their walls. And they can often be experts at placemaking themselves, and I think they're becoming more experts at placemaking in their sort of surrounding communities. So I'm going to start with Marilyn, and I know that your university sort of made an intentional choice to play a role in your community and leverage cultural resources to do that of both your institution and the community. So are there lessons that sort of translate from a university serving as an anchor institution to sort of creating cultural spaces that serve as anchor institutions for revitalization, and sort of talk a little bit about your project and how you've translated those capacities as an academic institution?
Okay, thanks. I also love Milwaukee. I'm very happy to be here. We decided intentionally to work in a neighborhood that was a mile and a half away from campus, which is kind of unusual in anchor institution work. Poorest neighborhood in the city, one of the poorest in the country, third world levels of poverty, infant mortality, et cetera. Lessons learned, we took a year to listen before we did anything. We built on the assets in the community, which included a very left-wing Catholic church that was real activist with the Berrigan brothers and all kinds of people, and a locally owned grocery store started by a Lebanese immigrant and is now run by his son. And we used the assets in the neighborhood, listened for a year, and got our students engaged. And what we've learned about creative placemaking from the university standpoint is that it involves being very bold and innovative in design, being art and neighborhood dialogue have to go together. That's the second thing. And the third thing we found is that what drives creative placemaking for us is the energy of unlikely coalitions, which you talked about a little earlier with farmers and artists. Well, we've also found that engineers and musicians and heads of the Public Housing Tenant Association with wealthy developers, mixing people together to solve urban problems and create creative spaces really works.
And can you mention some of the cultural projects that you've done in the Near West Side neighborhood?
Sure. Our students, 958 students have been engaged, and they've done everything from, they turned a former crack house into a neighborhood art center that is thriving today. They have built and designed homes. They started a Latino cultural center that did not exist before this project started. They developed new signage for the neighborhood, redeveloped a park. They started with a creative writing professor, a dialogue with neighborhood police about violence that resulted in a book being published by both the teenagers in the neighborhood and the police. And now there's a writing program that goes on together, and it's really helped with violence. They have done, they took a literacy through photography program that helped children in the neighborhood to learn how to write by taking digital pictures and blowing them up and putting them in the boarded up windows of vacant buildings with their aspirations on them. Our art students did that work. So it's very multifaceted.
And I think it's clear that you're probably drawing on all the capacities of the university, all the different faculty and schools and disciplines and practices to actually make that happen, which I think is really interesting. And I think with the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design, you've got this great resource in this body of students who are creative and talented and hungry, and I think being embedded in the downtown both physically and sort of socially and economically, has sort of put you in an interesting position. What are some of the strategies that you've used to connect this creative force into the sort of future of Milwaukee and integrating that?
I've had the advantage of being one of the last speakers, so I got to listen to what everyone else was saying, and I was trying to think, what can I say now that's entirely different than what I was planning on saying that would make a difference? First of all, my ad moved into the 3rd Ward when it was a war zone, so I'm told. And as I was talking with one of the students who's now a faculty, what was it like? He said, well, we had to have an escort to go across the street. Now, as you probably know, the 3rd Ward is alive. It's got theater, it has population, it's a wonderful happening place. In fact, at lunch today, someone said it's perhaps a little too slick. I'll take it. But the movement into that building was more than a 250,000 square foot building. That was only a piece of it. It was a catalyst, certainly. But it started with the president of the college assuming a responsibility in the community. It wasn't called placemaking. It was talking about an engagement in the community, which is really what this is all about. Doing a lot of listening. When I first got here, which is kind of a reflection on Milwaukee, I've been around a number of colleges. And when I first walked in, I was fortunate enough to meet with the heads of all of the major cultural institutions in the city. They had seen on my resume that I was involved with the chairing of a cultural plan for a city before. And they had been working for 1.5 years to 2 years to create a cultural plan. And as I listened to them, I heard the typical things that we hear. How can we get greater resources for what we do? How can we increase revenue? How can we increase audience? And I turned to them, as I'm saying today, by reversing your thinking. By focusing in on what it is that you can do, brings people in, which is my statement about how academic institutions can have a major play in an environment. First of all, they have to assume their responsibilities are outside their door. And what they do inside the college has to be connected more and more to their mission in the world. And the power of what we can do together is so much greater than what we can do separately. So my advice, even though there was questions that haven't been asked there, what would the advice be? Let go of your preconceived ideas. Really attempt to do something bigger than yourself. And that's kind of what I'm hearing here, and that's what everyone is lusting to do. And it's a great fun when, through that whole process that led to the Creativity Works in the Mount Auburn, all of that came from a start of thinking about a cultural plan. And it came to something that was citywide, which is a power making Milwaukee placemaking.
That's great. And I love that notion of scarcity to abundance. And it was actually sort of key to part of the founding of ArtPlace was this notion that we need to change the conversation about the arts from what do we need to what do we have to contribute. And I think that's exactly what you're saying here. And I think as these sort of large academic institutions, there's some interesting opportunities and tensions with the communities as you sort of seek to play a valuable role and yet not sort of take the full force of the institution and impose anything. So what are some of the ways that you've addressed that tension and sort of allowed both the community engagement while also, putting your resources towards an agenda for the future?
Well, in this case, this community had been promised so much for so long, and they hadn't had any investment for 7 decades. So they were very, very skeptical. So I think the first thing that we had to do was do something. We had to build something, because seeing is believing. And they were and that helped a great deal to overcome the skepticism. We relocated the public broadcasting station into this neighborhood, $22 million project. We redeveloped 4 warehouses into artist lofts and cultural centers. we actually accomplished something so they could look up and see that it was real. And then the other thing that we did is at the academic level, we had very informal groupings of engaged faculty. And we did that once a month so that they could really learn from one another and become inspired by one another. So we have a faculty member now who has working with unemployed people in the neighborhood, and they're making furniture out of the timbers that we pulled out of the warehouses and selling it to make job training sustainable in the neighborhood. And that came out of a luncheon with other faculty. So really coalescing those diverse faculty who want to do things and then getting out of the way and accomplishing something in the neighborhood. And not letting the neighborhood be used as a laboratory. I just stopped all surveys, no more surveys. And they were really, really tired of that.
I guess I would add the institutions, accredited institutions have responsibility not only to do good work, but to provide leadership. And by leadership, it is not telling other people what to do. It's finding out what's there and trying to interface with it. For example, MyEd uses the industries in the state as problem solving for our students, to the point where our students are brought in and asked to, with design thinking, solve problems that the engineers are not resolving. To the point of the relationship between engineers and designers, we are creating a joint program with the Marquette School of Engineering to teach engineers and designers together.
It's very cool. I'll ask sort of a final quick question. I think there's an interesting connection between universities and colleges and sort of what makes a community unique. What is the mix of things that is sort of helping to define this community? And how do you see your role as this large institution in highlighting, amplifying, what's unique about a place, particularly in terms of its sort of cultural and arts and life?
That's a great question. I think one of the ways that we've been able to do that is everybody loves I have my orange on. We're a basketball town, okay? And so the athletes come into the neighborhood frequently. Jim Boeheim, our coach, redid the park in the middle of the neighborhood. It's common ground. It really helps to build the Syracuse sense of place.
I think that all of us in higher education have an opportunity that resides with us. We can convene the people who are even in opposition. We can bring them together because basically we're neutral. And within our resources, we have expertise we can bring to bear to it. But we can convene it where the individuals are left only to complain. When they want a voice, we can help provide a voice.
And I just want to, I think that's both so powerful. And I think particularly this sports metaphor in light of the Bucks. It's an interesting question about what connects us as people. In an institution, oftentimes it is sports. In a community, it's also sports. And in both, it's also culture. And there's a lot of similarities to how people create meaning and cohesion around these notions of sort of a shared something to root for, So I think that's
and
really
music,
interesting.
those two
and
things,
music, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I think we're out of our time, but thank you guys.
Thank you.
America's Black Holocaust Museum. America's Black Holocaust Museum was founded in Milwaukee in 1988 by Dr. James Cameron, the last known survivor of a lynching. ABHM builds public awareness and understanding of historic racial injustice and current racial disparities in our country.
The museum works to advance the dialogue across our country and city's tragic racial divide by developing methods that promote healing and reconciliation, forgiving without forgetting, and further the highest ideals of American democracy.
For 20 years, America's Black Holocaust Museum received visitors from the Milwaukee region, the country, and the world at its Bronzeville facility, but was forced to close its doors in 2008.
The museum was a source of pride in Bronzeville and one of its last places of gathering. So when its doors closed, our community was deeply hurt, but sought new ways to move forward.
Through the Dr. James Cameron Legacy Foundation, ABHM reopened in 2012 as a virtual museum, entirely online, which contains over 2,500 exhibits chronicling the story of Africans in America from their captivity to present day.
The museum produces public engagement programming, such as film screenings and facilitated discussions conducted through collaborations with the Milwaukee Public Library, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee's Cultures and Communities program, and other community partners.
Led by a board of directors and an international advisory committee built of prominent organizers, artists, and other cultural leaders, its digital home still provides visitors with opportunities to develop new perspectives on race and its role in shaping our country's past, present, and future. ABHM works with 4 core themes: remembrance, resistance, redemption, and reconciliation.
Milwaukee is just beginning to understand how to use the museum in its new form, but we really would love to see a physical museum again.
Thank you.